The other nice advantage is that so long as there's a browser with standards compatible interfaces available on the device, they can usually access most of the web-based programs. Because these applications aren't running directly on the device, it allows for heavy processing to be done on remote servers, allowing smaller devices to run software that would have crippled it otherwise. So if you're doing data mining, or you're looking through hundreds and hundreds of records at once trying to find specific candidates for a program, you don't necessarily have to run it on the device. You can say, hey, find all these people. And rather than having the device chew through all these records and try to come up with it, which would normally cripple, say, a BlackBerry, it's done on the server or the cloud, and there you have your answers fairly quickly. Another advantage is that and this one will appeal to anyone that's had a hard drive failure, is that they tend to be less prone to hardware failure because they just moved to a new server or instance. They're less prone to hardware failure because if the instance goes down, they can just transition to a new system, bring up another instance, and bam, away you go. Whereas if it was on a locally installed device, if the device crashes, you have to move it, or you have to hope that you backed it up and then find another device you can use to replace it and continue on with the work you were doing. All right, so then we'll go on to the advantages of a locally installed system. This category of applications is the largest because it encompasses existing desktop software and also the new App Store varieties. They offer several advantages over their web-based counterparts. For instance, the applications generally tend to be faster and have a lower response time because they don't have to communicate with a remote server as frequently, if at all. This also makes them ideal for applications that need to run in real time, such as monitoring heart rate or other real-time tests. So if, for example, you were plugged into a peripheral device that you wanted to watch in real time as a patient's moving, say if you tied them to an activity monitor, or if you were testing balance, you could remotely watch the sensor in real time as they moved. They also tend to have cleaner interfaces because they can use the development environment that they were intended to be with. For example, a web interface isn't going to be as clean as, say, a native Apple interface. And finally, this is the big one, they actually can use the local hardware, so they can actually connect to Bluetooth, or in the cases of some of the newer products that are coming out, they have the near frequency scanners. You probably heard a lot about them. I think Bank of America is using them for the quick payment systems, but in theory, in the future, those will actually be able to be used with near frequency devices, such as the smart Band-Aids that are being developed by some people, or some of the companies out there for, say, glucose measurements and various other tests that can be run as a dermal patch. And there's actually one kind of similar to it, but it's not quite the same coming up here. But then we also have, when you're given the choice between them, why would you choose one over the other? So let's see. So for starters, the applications, web applications make more sense if you're anticipating a lot of changes to the interfaces, like we mentioned. Another reason to choose the web-based applications is that if you need to work with a large number of devices and you're not sure what the target application is. So for example, you're running it on a BlackBerry, you're running it on an iPhone, you're running it on somebody's desktop, then the web interface is generally going to be your best approach. Like I said, and the other best case would be like if you're doing data mining, collections, anything that's very process intensive. The locally installed applications, for the reasons I had mentioned before to begin with, they are sometimes cheaper than web-based solutions because they have a fixed cost that's usually a one-time cost and they don't require hosting to function. So if you're on a really tight budget, sometimes it's cheaper to buy an off-the-shelf software solution that's locally installed versus, say, renting cloud space or having somebody host your web server to actually collect and store your data. But the biggest, like I said, the biggest advantage for the locally installed applications is the ability to connect with peripherals and run in real time. So moving on, we'll take a look at some of the peripherals that are currently out there. They have scales, activity monitors, blood pressure cuffs, heart rate monitors, cardiac telemetry, which is actually being offered by a company called Corventis, and their monitoring software is a Windows-based, so you could potentially take this little device right here put it on the patient's chest, and watch their heart rate activity in real time on a graph. Yes, it is. So, I believe that was actually presented at a TED conference at one time. So then the blood pressure cuffs and the scales are a company called A&D Medical, and they're, all those two devices are Bluetooth. And then there's another company that provides an EEG machine that has a web interface, and basically it's an EEG band that you put on your head, and it connects to your alarm clock, so it can monitor your sleep, and then you can browse the interface via a web page. So, if you're doing a sleep study, you put this patient in a room with the headband, then you can monitor how they're sleeping on a minute-by-minute basis.
You could also use, like, I know at least on the Android stuff, I think you can actually use the Wii balance board.
Oh, I did not know.
I know there's Linux. I know I can actually do it on Linux. I'm a little bit, I can probably do it on Android.
Yeah.
Hear that comment on the back. What's that? Oh, you can actually, anyone who has got a Wii, and they got the balance board, they can actually use the balance board.
Yeah. And with the Kinect, they're doing a lot of stuff too as far as simulation goes.
Yeah. The Kinect's pretty cool because that's actually, they've actually hacked Kinect to actually do the stereo camera type stuff. And there's a full open source stack for that. And the Wiimote too is cool.
All right, so what does all this mean? Well, for starters, it means reduced delays in accessing information, because while you're in the patient's room, you can update the charts, you can pull in their labs, you can pull in their prescriptions, and just at your fingertips, you have all the information that you could want, and you have it immediately. You don't have to run to the front desk to see, when is this person scheduled next, and then run to the back of your office to see, what the lab results are, and then come back and say, what are you on, and then try to put all that together. Whereas now you could just say, look at it all on the same page instantly with the touch of a finger. Higher productivity from more streamlined processes, because there aren't as many steps and everything's together. You can see more patients, spend more time with them, and address their needs in more detail because you have all this information in one place. It's more accurate patient records because you're not holding it in your head while you move to the charts, or writing small notes to yourself and then trying to remember what was I talking about when I wrote this, or in doctor script, what did I just write? A faster turnaround for testing and lab results, because you don't actually have to wait for paper charts. You're actually, if they're being entered into an electronic record system, they'll come up immediately as soon as they're available, which means you don't have to sit around and wait for them. Also because they're all electronic forms, it allows you to share the information with the patient. So if they if they sign the waiver that says, I want you to email these records to me, or enter them in, they can enter them in Google Health Forms. They have access to their own information, and that allows them to take some of their own health information into their own hands. And in a lot of cases, they're actually promoting with mobile health, where they where you have distance doctors who say, here's a device, plug it into your phone, and you can send me the results. For example, my company is working with MUSC to do a research study on heart rate monitoring, and there's an app that we basically you hold your finger over the camera, the LED will illuminate your finger, and the difference in the shading on the camera will actually detect what your heart rate is, and send that off to a server at MUSC for their calculations as part of their research study. So I tried to keep it short and quick, so that because I know there's a lot of different people with research projects.
So a lot of what you talked about is sort of the generic sale on electronic medical records.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with tablets. You can certainly put touchscreens or
Yeah.
terminals. I've got lots of my doctors that have just a terminal in every exam room, so
Yeah.
that data falls around. So I'm curious, what specific things that the tablet gives you as an advantage, because so far our experience with the alternatives to just a keyboard and a monitor in the exam room itself have been less than satisfying. So I'm thinking that I know that there's a place for tablets.
Yeah.
And I think it's a hybrid. I don't think it's
Yes, it's definitely.
I don't think it's the whole app on the tablet, and I don't think it's the web app on the tablet.
No.
There's some soft point there that would be nice to find that killer app.
All right, well, I'll get well, the problem is that because a lot of the computers have been getting smaller and smaller as technology improves, Moore's law, The tablets and the computers are kind of hard to separate now because a lot of them, like especially like the Android phones, they now have keyboards. So the problem is, where do you differentiate between what constitutes, a desktop or a laptop versus what constitutes, say, a tablet, minus the keyboard? And in a lot of cases, even that's not always the differentiation. But as far as I think it boils down to being more mobile. You can save costs on buying desktops and putting them in every room if, say, you bought a single netbook and a docking station. So rather than the doctor having to log in each exam room, he just takes his the tablet, drops it into the docking station, and if he needs the keyboard, otherwise he can just use the stylus and punch in all the results as he's getting them. So I think it's more about mobility than necessarily anything else. It's like, how can I get all of this information together in a nice clean way so that I can save time and not have to move around and interact with 50 different devices or talk to 4 different people to find the one piece of information that could have been loaded instantly.
I think I have a partial answer to that for you. We have an application which is in development right now, which is also being tested in a research environment, to put in patients' hands in the registration area a tablet computer so they can read and sign off their patient's permission. So when you go to hospital, they get you to sign all these documents. Sure. And you'll sign up for whether or not you should contact the research, or whether or not you're prepared to give your discarded blood for research, whether you can, or whether you want to participate in such a study. And we emulated a tablet application, we compared it with a control environment against a touch screen that the registration clerk pushes around and faces you so that you can work with, or against the paper itself. We found that I think that's the personal connection with the actual device itself. You can take it away, read it, look at it, interact with it. It made it very, very powerful for patients. And their comprehension of what they signed, measured comprehension, increased. Their satisfaction with the entire process increased. And the satisfaction of the entire clinic, in actually the fact that they had an improved education experience going on with the patients, all were actually measurably and significantly increased in this environment. So in that, a busy clinic environment, busy registration clinic environment, we found a significant advantage for these tablet-based apps.
I can see giving it to the patients in lieu of a kiosk and all that. I know that huge frustration on my part in any doctor's office is refilling out all that stupid paper again. I know the data's already on the computer. I don't need my name and address typed again.
Sure. Tony, let me add to that. I just came from a demo this morning in Atlanta where it was a patient-facing application on an iPad. And what they're doing is it's more patient education and marketing while they're filling out their application. Now, you talked a little bit about informed consent, the signature sign. That's important too. But I think when you can use time, the patient normally would be sitting in the room reading a magazine, to present them with education on different diseases. In this case, the company I looked at was actually marketing a lot of products. But that can be helpful too, as long as there's an educational aspect to it.
Interesting. That is a really good example. I was thinking it's more on the doctor's side of the wall than the patient's side.
I think it's a good patient-facing side. It's a particular advantage.
It's easy to deploy too.
Can you talk more